इश्यू अफ द डे को आजको यो श्रृंखलामा हामीले नेपालको विकासको क्षेत्रमा सरकारसँग सहकार्य गर्दै आएको संयुक्त राष्ट्र संघ विकास कार्यक्रम UNDP की कन्ट्री डाइरेक्टर शोको नोडासँग कुराकानी गरेका छौं। विशेष गरी गरिबी निवारणको लक्ष्य लिएर नेपालमा कार्य गरिरहँदा गरिबी निवारणका समस्या सहस्राब्दी विकास लक्ष्यका विषयमा केन्द्रित रहन्छौं। In 2000, 189 world leaders made a historic promise at the United Nations Millennium Summit when they signed onto the Millennium Declaration and agreed to meet the Millennium Development Goals. Nepal is one of the member states of the United Nations that joined the global pledge to achieve the Millennium Development Goals by 2015. There are 8 Millennium Development Goals and targets under the goals to be achieved. The 8 Millennium Development Goals are eradicate extreme hunger and poverty, achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality, achieve gender equality and women empowerment, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, combat HIV, AIDS, malaria and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability and develop a global partnership for development. These are the 8 Millennium Development Goals. Currently, UNDP, United Nations Development Programme, is working in Nepal to help the government to achieve Millennium Development Goals. Similarly, UNDP has been supporting Nepalese people in the struggle against poverty too. We have the country director of UNDP, Shoko Noda, in our studio, and we will have a talk on the topic of struggle against poverty in Nepal as well as Millennium Development Goals. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
It's 50 glorious years of UNDP here in Nepal, and it has been working against the struggle of poverty as well as in different projects and different issues in Nepal. How does UNDP evaluate its work in this span of time?
I think 50 years sounds very long, and I think for the past 50 years we had very different programs to implement. I think in the beginning we had some infrastructure development. Also we supported the national telephone network, also civil aviation system. That was some 40 years ago. But then I think we have moved to a more of a capacity development, institutional building, and then also working very closely with the community. At the central level, for example, the Local Self-Governance Act of 1998 was supported by UNDP. At the same time, on the ground, we also supported communities. And the success, I think, of UNDP's work is because we were flexible enough and adapted to the latest Nepali development dynamics and context. So during the crisis for the past 10 years, that our support went more to the community level. But now, after the peace agreement was signed, that we have been working on the constitution development, also elections, to also adapt to the new challenges that Nepal is facing.
UNDP has been supporting Nepalese people in their struggle against poverty since it's established here in Nepal. In this duration, how do you assess your work on the on the issue of poverty reduction?
Good question. I think we have been successful in working with the government and the community to reduce poverty. If you look at the goal 1 of MDG, actually I would like to congratulate Nepal because you have already achieved the target of halving the poverty. At the grassroots level, as I said, we've been working with the community. For example, we have micro enterprise development program where we have created about 56,000 new businessmen and women. We have reached those among 56,000 beneficiaries, we have, I think, more than 20% is Dalit women, and then also overall about 70% of the beneficiaries for that program is also women. We have also reached different ethnic groups and then different social groups. So our aim has been not only the poverty reduction, but also targeting those marginalized groups in the communities.
Eradication of poverty and hunger is the first target of Millennium Development Goal. Will Nepal achieve this goal by 2050?
Yes, as I said, Nepal has already achieved this goal, and that's excellent. I think the reason why Nepal has achieved this goal is because of the remittance, and that's remarkable. But we should also look at how we can create jobs within the country, so that the economy will not be too dependent on global economy, but also create jobs, because a lot of young people are now leaving for different countries.
Exactly.
But for poverty reduction purpose only, that is making some progress, but in the longer term, I think we have to think of how to retain young people in the country, and for that, this year's budget has increased the allocation for the agricultural sector, and I think that's a very important issue, and the development of agricultural sector or tourism sector will be the drive for further poverty reduction.
As you mentioned earlier, that remittance is one of the remittance is contributing in Nepal's economy. Many of the Nepalese working abroad have been sending money to their families, and the economy of Nepal is sustained on that. But it's the process of building economy and poverty elimination or poverty reduction sustainable through remittance only?
So I think it's very important to create a market and jobs in the country that becomes much more sustainable, and we have to, I mean, if you also look at other MDG achievement, for the education we see the progress. For gender we see also the progress, but the point is those young people who have been benefiting from the recent development and progress also shall work for the country rather than going abroad.
What programs has UNDP designed for youths to get involved in the jobs in this nation?
Enterprise development program that I mentioned, which started in '98, had about 56,000 beneficiaries that include youth and women and in different social groups, and I think that's very important. And then it goes a little bit beyond youth, but we have been also working in the area of micro hydropower. And once the village has energy, electricity, a lot of things can be done to develop business, or health clinic has refrigerator to keep vaccination. The kids can also study, can do their homework at night. I visited last year I think it was Bagalung district, where I saw that process of development with electricity, and it takes long. It took 2 years for the community to agree to have the micro hydro, and then 3-4 years to build it. And not only then, for the past 3 to 5 years there's a benefit of electricity, but I think this process is very important, and we are involving in developing micro hydro power.
Fooding, housing, or let's say living standard, as well as education, health services, infrastructure developments are the key issues for poverty reduction. While you are on the field with coordination with the Nepalese government or the local communities or other organizations, what are the key priorities of UNDP?
We are working on MDGs, but I think the added value that UNDP is making is to work in the area of disaster risk reduction and governance. And first about disaster risk reduction. As I said, Nepal has made tremendous progress for the past 30, 40 years. For example, life expectancy has been extended by 20 years. The past 40 years, the income per capita is almost doubled, and I think also the enrollment rate of kids doubled. So it's one of the fastest achiever of human development. However, if tomorrow a disaster like earthquake happens, that the development gains of the past 40 years can be lost in 1 second, 1 minute. So we are also working with the government to reduce risks of those disasters. I mean, it's also related to climate change, but at the national level, for example, we are supporting the government to set up the National Emergency Operations Center, and that has a network at the district level and also regional level. So we are in the process of setting up those centers, and then also supporting the capacity of the government. And then on the ground, we're also working with the communities to set up disaster management committees, and then at their level also they're preparing for any unwanted event. So that's to protect the development gains of the past 40 years is one of the priorities that we have. And then also I'd like to say the importance of governance. Governance itself is not really reflected in MDGs in Nepal. However, with all the beautiful policies, if they are not implemented properly, we don't see the progress. If we have corruptions, again, the progress can be a bit compromised. So for UNDP, the work of governance is extremely important, and we are trying to make it as socially inclusive as possible in that area.
I want to know that while you are on the field, with your plans designed to implement about poverty reduction, many issues are connected with poverty reduction, as I mentioned earlier, like living standard of people, education, health of child and mother, as well as education, etc. are the key factors. While you are on the field to work, what are your priorities among these things for poverty reduction? Education or health or living standard or what?
As you said, poverty reduction is not only about income. It's about also nutrition, education, health, also environment, sustainability,
development.
Exactly. So all becomes priorities. UN has different technical assistance arms. So other agencies have their own comparative advantages. For UNDP, I think the comparative advantage is, the policy work, and as I said, also the governance of all the policies, how the systems, institutions are working, so the capacity building of different institutions, and then also reaching out to the communities for income generations and social inclusion. These are the priorities.
How challenging do you find the gap between the rich people and poor people in Nepal?
It's very difficult for me to face the reality, because in Kathmandu, including myself, we have a relatively easy life. But when I go to the field, I was in Palpa the other day, and then traveled without staff from UNDP, but traveled with another person and really stayed in the village, in people's house, and then see the level of living is just so different. For them, water itself is an issue. I got only this much of water to wash and then do everything for one day and then have simple food. So I myself experienced the disparities between the rich and often in Kathmandu, what we do here, and then on the ground. I think it's not only about rich people and poor people in this country. It's also about, as I said, different social groups
Exactly.
have different status, and then even though we congratulate Nepal for poverty reduction and so on, if you really disaggregate the data, for example, even the literacy, Dalit women illiteracy rate is much higher than women in general. If you look at the different social groups, the disparities exist or maybe are becoming bigger, and then this is where we have to really target and not to leave anybody behind. It's not only the average that we are talking about, but those who come at the bottom need to be helped out.
You yourself went to the field and lived the life. You mentioned that you saw a very vast difference between the people living in the urban areas and the people living in the rural areas. The life standard is totally different.
Yeah.
There's a gap between rich and poor people. What approaches do you follow while making a data or preparing a report about poverty reduction then?
It's very important to disaggregate the data between men and women, also among different social groups, and that's where you can see the real bottlenecks. Even the simple literacy rate, men's literacy rate is, I think, about 60 to 70, but women's literacy rate is only around 40%. Of course, now for the new generations, it is changing. Disaggregating data and then having a very sharp target is very important.
Which data you find authorized while preparing a report?
We use all different data, but we rely on the government data to analyze. But from UNDP, we also have different field offices, and that's where, well, data is one thing, but we also have to look at the quantitative side of issues. So for that we have field offices and really to monitor what's happening.
People in the remote areas dies out of starvation. Children are facing a problem of malnutrition. The creation of job is very less. Unemployment rate is increasing. So what is your short-term plan as well as long-term plan for reducing poverty, because these are the key factors that affects the poverty rate in Nepal. What are your short-term as well as long-term plans to coordinate with government as well as the local communities to reduce poverty in Nepal?
I think we have to also look at the inflation rate, because if you look at it, it's increasing quite rapidly, and that affects the living, income of, basically the real income of households. This is not something that UNDP can change, but we need to have a very good policy, and then we are ready to also work with the government. As I said, I think lack of employment opportunities for young people is also an issue. So we are working with, for example, the National Planning Commission to have a more cohesive policy for youth employment, and just make sure that young people do not just run away, but to stay and then work for their own country. And I think that's another important issue, as I said, is electricity. I think with electricity,
exactly. I want to know that what is United Nations Development Program for reducing poverty? Though we are able to achieve the NDC for poverty as well as hunger, but still the poverty rate is the poverty in the ground level is same, as you also mentioned earlier. What are the policies that UNDP has made or focused to reduce the poverty in Nepal?
So we are working with the government to expand the program of enterprise development program for the next 5 years, and I think it's very important, as I said, that jobs need to be created in the rural area, and then especially for young people. We are not involved in agriculture, but to use the agricultural sector, I think, is very important. And instead of exporting raw materials, if in Nepal we can process those agricultural products, and I think that would add value instead of another country adding those values and then resell. So for that, I think again the business is very important, and then UNDP would like to work on that area.
In the report prepared on 2010, it was mentioned that if the government is able to manage resource and build institutional and policy capacity for implementation of the strategic intervention, most of the MDG targets can be met by 2015. So what's the status now when we are in 2030? This 3 years gap, what's the improvement plan?
So as I said, there's a lot to congratulate Nepal and then the government for the achievement of MDGs. One goal which is lagging behind is sanitation, goal 7. And for that, United Nations and the government have developed the acceleration strategy to really, accelerate efforts and then put some more resources. So we have now that framework and action plan to work with the government. This ODF campaign, Open Defecation Free campaign, is phenomenal. Wherever I go, even this little village or the village also declares ODF very proudly, and I think that campaign is also excellent. We also need to look into sanitation facilities in school that also has multiple progress to poverty reduction, because if there's sanitation facility in school, kids can come and then can stay instead of getting sick.
Exactly.
So sanitation is one area where the United Nations is working with the government to accelerate the efforts.
Any other development goals that is yet challenging now?
Well, although the poverty has been halved, as I said, job creation is still it remains challenging in Nepal.
You said that sanitation is one of the major problems in rural areas, right? It is the major problem in urban areas. Do you agree this or not? Or how are you working in urban areas with this problem?
Yes, I think in total 2/3 of the population has access to some sort of sanitation facility, but 30% are left behind, both in rural areas but also urban areas, and then we really need to look into this issue.
Drinking water is also one of the subjects to be discussed. People have tap in the home, but drinking water is not available. So how can we meet this target of MDG?
Nepal has one of the largest water reservoir in the world. So it is not really about the getting water. We are not living on a desert. It's how to manage the water resources, and that's why as I said before, the governance or management of water resources or any natural resources is extremely important. And if we manage water resources, we'll have much more electricity and then also drinking water. Yes, and in rural areas, although I think during monsoon season suddenly they have overflow of water, but if you go to a dry season like I did in April, literally even for a family to give me this much of water must have been very, very difficult, and they have to walk for 2-3 hours to get water. So really to have very good, very basic water system is needed, and that requires good management and governance.
So what should government do, or what should UNDP should do to meet the target of Goal 7?
Well, I mean, it's not only UNDP, but as I said, the whole UN is behind the government to accelerate this Goal 7 progress. So it's not only I mean, as I said, it's a governance issue. On the ground, yes, we need to bring water. We need a bit of infrastructure for that, basic infrastructure and toilets for sanitation, and then some, to drill wells and so on. But I think more importantly, the policy at the national level will be also important. Government has developed a new national sanitation program 2010 or 2011, where I think a lot of points are articulated, and I think in Nepal there are a lot of good policies existing, but implementation part and allocation of fund, and also to follow up and monitor the results on the ground will be very critical.
On the projects, on the programs where UNDP itself is involved, how monitoring is done, or just by the government or the organization, UN organization itself have a field visit on those areas where the programs are implemented? How the monitoring is done?
When we develop programs, we have a result matrix, and then we put the very clear target, what we would like to achieve 5 years from now, and then we annualize that target, so we know every year what our targets are, and then we have a good system to monitor. As I said, it's not only about looking at the data, but going to the field and then see what's happening on the ground. So we have offices in the field, and I encourage all the colleagues to just go and then see what's happening with their own eyes. It's very important also to go with government officials, as I often do, so that the problems are shared, and in the end, what is important about development business is national ownership. The government and Nepal have to be on the driving seat. UNDP and then other development partners can support, but it can be fragmented if our agencies come differently. I think really the Nepali government have to know the priorities themselves, and then kind of guide the development partners where the resources should be allocated and how they should be spent.
So how responsible do you find the government of Nepal on that driving seat? I've been here for the past 2 years, and then this sense of ownership is growing, and I think it's very, very good. I think it's also, we are coming out of the peace process, and I think we are going now through the different stage of transition, and I see that the government ownership issue is gaining momentum, and I just hope that there will be an equal partnership between development partners and government, and it's not only about the budget, amount of budget that we should be talking about, but the content and substance of assistance is now at this point very, very important, and for that governments to tell us and then discuss jointly how we spend on what subject, what sectors would be critical. But government, I think their sense of ownership is definitely increasing. Government is also working to meet all the targets and to achieve all the goals of Millennium Development Goals. So here, while we talk about one of the goals on the Millennium Development, maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rate is reduced. But still we hear the news, and we find some of the data saying us that the infant mortality rate as well as maternal mortality rate is increased, and some of the reasons as well as in some groups in Nepal. Similar is the case in education. How do you take this?
Your question about disparities exist, but I think the public awareness campaign has been very, very effective. And then also, I myself have seen the female community health volunteers. I think they wear blue sari and then go around different villages. And now we have about 52,000 of those volunteers in different village, and this system started in 1988, and I think it's now much more systematized. That though they are still called volunteers, they get very modest allowance as well, and I think this system is also helping, and then there are much more health facilities. Sometimes 24-hour emergency facilities are also available more than before. So yes, a big achievement for Nepal. I think the challenge, as I said, is to reach out to those villages which are very, very far. It takes 2-3 hours to get there. How we ensure the safe delivery at the safe the health facility rather than at home. So I think again a bit of infrastructure will be also needed, but all in all I think we're making a lot of progress.
While talking about gender equality and women empowerment, one of the Millennium Development Goals, where are we?
Again, big achievement for the ratio between girls and then boys at school is now at par, or even more girls are going to school at the primary level and the secondary level as well. I think the ratio is 0.93, means that almost 50-50. So at the education level, it's great. But when you look at the workplace employment data, the women are getting less paid, but working hours is longer. That means that a lot of work that women are carrying out are not paid, like agriculture. If you agriculture sector, if you go to the field again, there are a lot of women working, but they are not paid. So this is something that we need to look into, because those well-educated women are now available in the market, at the community, and then in urban areas. How to utilize their potentials and capacity equally as men, I think remains challenging.
And while talking about women empowerment, there are many organizations that advocates for women development, but still we hear the news about women violence, that women are lacking behind on different issues, even about education, about health. Though we achieve the target of girls' enrollment in primary level, how UNDP is working on the field for women empowerment, and where are we on that matter in achieving the target of NDC?
So MDGs has only the very primary basic data, where, as we agree, that women have made remarkable progress, but a lot of challenges are not really reflected in MDGs. And for example, how UNDP is helping this out, we are working, for example, with former CA members, female CA members, and facilitating the dialogues, empowering, and then also providing capacity development kind of assistance. Because unless we touch at that national level, it is very difficult to reach out. To come up with a new policy which are much more gender friendly, and then implement. I think it was remarkable also that in CA it's more than 30% of the members were women, but still when you look at the reality, how much did they get involved in decision-making process? Much less.
What challenge do you find in gender equality and women empowerment targets to be achieved? What are the challenges that is sought out by UNDP?
So as I said, it's very important to empower the decision makers and also those who are involved in policy making, policy implementation. We have to increase the number of women.
Let's discuss about the next MDG. Nepal is facing a severe energy crisis. As a result, we are facing a problem of load shedding here. There's a very limited supply of energy. So, in this status, how can we meet the goal of ensuring environment sustainability?
So as I said, Nepal has a lot of power. So and then if we use those a lot of water. So if we use the water much more efficiently and effectively through micro or mini or any hydropower systems, we will be able to have much more power and energy. I think so. It's a question of management and governance of those natural resources. Equally, Nepal is considered as a beautiful country with a lot of natures. You have already resources there. It's how to protect those resources and how to use it in a much more sustainable manner.
The policies are made. As you said, there are beautiful policies made by the Nepalese government, right? So those policies are in the level of implementation. Some policies have been implemented, some are still yet to be implemented. So how challenging it is for government to meet this target by 2015?
I think the challenge or what we need to do is to make sure that we allocate proper resources and also to have a sustainable policy, and for that we need a proper government, not a short-term government, but need to have elections and then have elected government to have longer vision of the country than short-term that I think for the past 2 years at least I have been seeing. So I think the first priority, although I may not be directly answering your question, but holding elections is extremely important, and then also not only at the national level but also at the local level. That's where we can really change people's life. They are directly related to people's daily life. So I would say that elections, proper budgeting, and there I think effective implementation will be also possible. And for sanitation, which is lagging behind, the target is by 2015, 80% of the whole population will have access to sanitation. Now we have reached 67%. So with ODF, as I said, extra acceleration efforts from the government side and then other development partners side, one shall remain optimistic, but cautiously.
Total estimated resource need for MDG intervention for 5-year period is 1,395.8 billion Nepalese rupees. This is the data that I got to know when I went through the pages of MDG report, which was published in 2010. There's a gap of 32.3% of total needs. How challenging it is for government to manage the gap for meeting targets?
One is to look at this development progress through the budget and quantity, but importantly this involves the partnership, not only in the government but partnership with development partners. And here, if we only look at the number of or budget figure, and then it becomes like donors giving money to the government, and then the relation will not be equal. I think we should go much beyond that figures that we have, and then see how all can be equal partners, looking at, for example, trade system, also bringing private sector into the development, because in the end what the development partners and the government can do to the development of a country is limited unless we have a robust private sector to drive the economy in the country. So how to create new partnership with private sector, how to have much more substantial discussions of development aid rather than just looking at the budget, I think is important, and I think Nepal has reached that stage where we should go beyond the budget figures, but really to talk about the substance of development aid.
What is the resource available now, and what is the gap? The report is yet to be published, right? The figure that I mentioned, 1,395.8 billion Nepalese rupees, this report is of 5 years period. So now we have 2.5 years remaining. Where is the gap now?
The next report will not cover that figure itself. The report that you are mentioning is a supplementary report that we made in addition to the MDG national report. We are not looking at the figures at this point, but as I said, picking up very important goals which are lagging behind, like sanitation. In Nepal, it's sanitation, and then focus on identify the bottlenecks, why it's lagging, and have much more effective implementation of existing policies, programs, and hopefully also from some development partners to allocate additional funding, and then also technical support, technical assistance. So this is how we would like to work with the government for the next 3 years.
Is there sufficient budget for work to meet the targets?
I think the acceleration framework government has, I don't have the figure, but government has allocated more also resources for sanitation. I think this year's budget has very good clear priorities, as I said, sanitation, but also agriculture. I think energy is another sector that they have put together. So it's a very good budget. Also the ministries are now authorized to start spending. So things are moving, and as I said, it's not only about the budget figures, which is important, but how those resources are spent and how those resources are reaching out to the community. And then what results we are making. That is what we should be looking at.
So what are the challenges that must be addressed by government of Nepal to achieve MDG in today's context when it's just 2.5 years remaining to meet the target?
Government needs to prioritize, and for those goals which have been achieved, we shall be proud of those progress and focus on goal 7, which has sanitation environment aspects, and then work on it. As I said before, it's also important to see beyond those simple goals, but also look at the governance side of all the implementation of policies, and as well as looking at the preparedness and risk reduction and climate change impact, which are not fully reflecting the current MDGs. But as I said, those are gains that we have made for the past not only 15 years, but for the past 40 years, can be lost in 1 minute if a big earthquake takes place. So I think we also need to think how we can protect those development gains. This is very important.
So you work with government bodies, and you mentioned that you also work on the local level with local communities. It has been more than 15 years that the local body is not in existence, right? So how are you working? Although we don't have that local elected body,
we are working with the VDC and DCD, and also the government has a local governance and community development program. It's called AGCDP, and UNDP is a partner of the program to support the mobilization of communities, so that we reach out to those marginalized women who usually do not have voices at the planning process. That first we have to sensitize those women, have to bring them from home, get together, and then just to have awareness training of even starting with sanitation, income generations, their rights, so that they will be empowered. And once they are empowered, they also will know that they can also participate in the planning process. So we are doing that kind of social mobilization, and then at the same time we are supporting the World Citizens Forum, where different groups within the community are represented to discuss the planning and allocation of resources. So while the elected body is no longer existing, I mean, since 2002, we are doing our best to bridge the gap. But as I said before, it is extremely important that we have formally elected bodies, both at the national and local levels, to properly represent people's voices.
How hard it is for UN organizations, for UNDP to reach out on that community, to that people, to hear their problems, to implement the projects when there is the absence of local bodies? How challenging it is for you?
We never found it challenging. We have to do it, because that's the situation that we face. So we take this challenge as positively, and have to, as I said, we have to adapt ourselves to the current situation of Nepal. 20 years ago, when we had elected bodies, our work modality was a little bit different, but there's something that we cannot really have control over. So we don't think it is difficult. We have to do, because in the end we do need to reach out to the communities, and we want to see positive changes in their life.
UNDP is sure about that by 2015 Nepal will be able to meet all the goals of MDG.
We are working for that goal.
Ms. Noda, it's said that the involvement of UN agencies, UN organizations, as well as other international agencies in Nepal has increased the dependency rate of nations like Nepal. How true do you find this statement? There's
always risk of dependency, whether it's in post-crisis, post-disaster situation, or post-conflict country like Nepal. I think, but it also depends on the government and people of Nepal to have a very strong ownership of their own peace process, which I think is very true in Nepal, and then also development process. And you have to be on the driving seat to drive the process, rather than just accepting offered assistance is easily. I think, as I said, Nepal has to have long-term vision where they would like to go, and based on that, to strategically use support offered by development partners. I think that's very important.
Similarly, it's also said that rather than the realities of the nations where international agencies, where international organizations are working, it's said that organizations are directed as per the interest of giant nations or as the interest of donor agencies, donor nations. What do you say?
Of course, each each member state of UN make contributions, and that depends on the how strong their economies are. So it's some countries may bring more contributions. However, Nepal or I come from Japan, all the countries have equal one seat in the UN. So Nepal is also a full member state of the UN, and UN is always the UN is yours, and it's owned by all the member states. So we are not only driven by a certain group of donors.
You don't agree then with this statement?
No, we don't agree.
We're about to wrap up the show. Any new projects or programs that is being implemented, or any new programs that the UNDP has designed for the development of Nepal?
Please say again.
Any new development projects that UNDP has planned for the development of Nepal?
We just signed the 5-year development plan with the government. There, our focuses are first the governance, and then also peace process, because it's still a residual work that we have to do, environment and energy, and disaster risk reduction, climate change risk reduction, and then poverty reduction and social inclusion. These are the 5 pillars that we have for the next 5 years.
Lastly, anything you want to say?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I enjoyed these conversations. Thanks.
Thank you for being here, and namaste.
Namaste.
सन् 2015 सम्ममा सबै लक्ष्य प्राप्त गरिरहँदा दिगो विकासलाई पनि प्राथमिकता दिनुपर्दछ। अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय संस्थाहरू छन्, तर सरकार र सम्बन्धित निकायहरूले नेतृत्वदायी भूमिका निर्वाह गर्नु अत्यन्तै जरुरी छ। आजलाई इश्यू अफ द डे को यो श्रृंखला यति नै। बिदा दिनुहोस्। नमस्ते।